Okay, so this process 2. I'm going to do, instead of the axonometric, I'm going to do a perspective and 2 elevations. But this time I'm going to try to accommodate it better to the interface or to the final panel of InDesign. Okay, so I'm going to go to Rhino. We don't have the project yet, so I'm going to do very fast some Boolean operations here. I'm going to grid snap, create a box. I'm going to make sure this is set to the 0, 0 coordinate. I'm going to just click several numbers like 10, 15, and 20, just to give one. I'm going to create a couple of forms that interact with this, such as a cylinder. I'm going to move it down a little bit. And torus here, and move it up with a gizmo. And copy. You can copy by pressing Alt and dragging. Actually, it's quite fast to do so. And copy by pressing Alt again. And I'm going to move it here. I'm also going to create a pyramid. And I'm going to rotate it like 180 degrees so it flips down, bring it down, and also intersect with the box and coming down there. So we're going to use now the Boolean, not the difference nor the union, but the intersection. I'm going to select first the box, enter, and then all of the rest to see what happens. And this is going to be my project of the day. Because I like it very much, I'm happy with it. I'm going to place it in another layer, let's say in my Pedro layer. So I'm going to select it, right click, change object layer. And I don't like this color, how it looks. I'm going to just go to a red color, just because I'm a picky guy. Okay, I'm going to actually do first one thing that's useful. When you have a lot of layers you're not using and you know you deleted a long time ago, there's a command like in AutoCAD, it's Purge. You press enter and it cleans everything except whatever you have, which is layer Pedro. That's great. Okay, I want to take this to InDesign, but I want to go through the process of cleaning up in Illustrator, scaling things properly, et cetera, et cetera. So first of all, I need to decide what is the best view of this project and potentially every single project. So I'm going to choose one of the isometrics, set view isometric and southeast. For example, this could be good. On the other hand, I actually said that I was going to do a perspective, so I changed my mind. This would be the axonometric that I'm asking in the final, but I said in this occasion that I was going to do a perspective. So I'm going to go to properties and not parallel. I'm going to be doing a perspective. Okay, I'm going to do zoom extend to go to the center of that. And I'm going to choose a nice perspective. Okay, maybe I can even change the set camera just lens and click with the left button so it's a little bit more intense, the perspective. For example, here. Okay, I like this view. What happens if I want to save this view? Because I have other projects that I have to respect exactly the same view. What I'm going to do is go to name views. And if you don't have this in your interface, you can also go triangle, set view, name views. This is exactly as here, but I'm going to click there to see that that's open. You're going to save as, and I'm going to call it cool perspective. So that's the one. What does this do? This actually does that. Even if you're dancing around the world and moving things around, you can always double click to the name views here, and it goes exactly to that view. It's a very useful tool for our panel. Again, if you're moving around, you can either double click here or go back to set view and cool perspective. Boom, no? Okay, so now it's always the same, make to the click enter. maintain source layers, hidden lines, and here's cool perspective. So I'm gonna say okay. It takes a little time. The layers start adding different layers to that. And it's taking longer just because I have Zoom open, but otherwise it wouldn't take so long. I'm gonna go to the top view and move, pressing the arrow, and before I deselect the lines to the side, so they're not on top of the project. Okay, here it is, select, file, export selected, give it a nice name. I will call it like project, let's call it A1 because it's in the grid A1, for example, in the first position of the grid in the final panel. Make sure this is Illustrator, save, standards or defaults. Oh. Okay. You can jump now to Illustrator, open, and project A1, open, and here it is. Now, before I start, scaling things up, etc., I'm going to Control-C that. I would like to know how big is actually the space that I'm dealing with here in InDesign. Now, if I zoom out, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 grid units, and I need to fill one single space with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different drawings. I'm bringing 3 only now, but I do know that from 0 to 10.5 and from 0 to 10.5, so that would be to 11, not and a half, sorry, because these ones go from 10 to 12. So this grid measures 11 by 11, but I'm going to use 10 and 10, and I'm going to put it in the middle here. So I'm going to go back to Illustrator. I'm going to say New. I'm going to say Print because this has to be printed, and I don't want any of the defaults, obviously. I need to make my own size. So I'm going to say inches. I'm going to change this not to 11, but to 10 and 10. Okay, 10 inches. Doesn't matter if it's portrait or landscape because it's square. Say create. And this is the paper space that I want to create all of my line drawings. This is just the default paper space. These are the lines that I want to bring with me. So I'm going to select all of them, all, Control-C. I'm going to go back to the paper space, Control-V as in Victor. Now I probably did something wrong right there. If you paste Control-V and you don't remember to click Paste Remember Layers, then the layers are not coming. So make sure that your Paste Remember Layers option is checked. Okay, in my case, it was always checked, so I don't have any problem. When you paste, you should have these layers. Make to the visible curves and whatever name you gave to your layer. Make to the hidden curves and whatever name, no? Now, yes, we can start scaling and adapting, fixing, etc., etc. Now, I mentioned that I was going to bring a perspective and 2 elevations. So I'm going to select 2 elevations, such as this 2. I'm deleting the other one. We're going to have to be consistent later on with all of the projects in the panel number 1 should have the same elevations. But for now, I'm going to use these 2. I'm going to bring them here to the side, and I'm going to scale my perspective quite big. And move this to the side. And this one a little bit here. They're probably touching a little bit too much. I'm going to make it a little smaller. Select only the elevations, bring them to the left. To move an object, you need to be on top of one of the lines, so you can't actually just select outside or inside of the box. Okay, I'm going to move this a little bit high up. And this one could be now a little bit bigger. Snapping to the top. Using the arrows to move to the left. Okay. To make sure, and this is something I encourage that you test for now, is let's try to bring some guidelines here. How do we do that? If you go to View, and you say Rulers, Show Rulers, these little guys here will appear in your Illustrator. And when you press Shift, and on top of the rulers, you bring what is called a guideline. I'm going to place it in one side and press Shift from the top ruler and bring it down to the top. I'm going to actually create a new layer and call it Guides, because I think it's important. I'm going to select the guides and I'm going to place them on that new layer. And I'm going to lock them so I cannot actually select the guides, but I can use them as reference to my drawings. So I'm going to select these and make sure snap in there. And I'm going to bring another guide for the bottom and another one here for the side. Lock. Okay, just as an exercise, bring some guides because we're going to be using them a lot from next class on. Okay, the guides are great for us. Imagine you want to do another project, you will be able to use this same template and place the next perspective or the next plan and the next drawings exactly in the same location, and that way they will be precisely aligned. No? Okay, so remember that now we have to fix the coloring. I'm going to turn off the guides, and now we need to, make sure that the lines are nicely put together in style and thickness and so on. I'm going to select the visible lines. I'm going to go a little bit funky with this one. I'm going to make it a little bit thinner, but I'm going to use like a blue color. Again, you have some possibilities of having a little more fun. I'm going to select now in the other layers the hidden ones, and here we're going to make it 0.5, a little lighter because I think the blue is less intense. So, and for sure the dash line tends to be smaller than the default in Illustrator. Okay. Maybe to see it even better, I could make a little thicker the visible line. So I'm going to go layers, visible line, and 1. Okay. There is the project. I like it. Save, Control S. I bring it in a folder. Probably your folder is called something like Viz3. And then you might have a folder inside that's called Illustrator folders. And I'm going to call it Project A1. You can overwrite the original one. It actually tends to save again, but you don't want to probably write that one because it's an old one, but you can just say Project Final or something. Defaults are good. Okay. And now our last step will be to bring it into Illustrator. Again, somebody asked about why is it not printing. The first layers, title, do not print layers. And by the way, if you don't find some of these things like layers or the stroke line, you tend to have everything under Windows and click the ones that you want. Okay, so everything that's in do not print will not print. So if I actually place something, such as my final project, and you're not noticing, but this actually was placed under do not print because that's what the layer you're working with, it's green. That means that that object is not going to be printing. So just make sure that when you place something, you place it working on the images, and then you turn off maybe the do not print. You can even lock it so you make sure you're not working with that too much. Okay, I'm in the image layer, image, play, file place, final, open. And here are 2 ways to place something in InDesign. One is click left button and drag around. Here is what you should do. Never do this because you just change the scale of the drawing. We don't want to do that. We prepared the Illustrator template so it fits exactly on the InDesign. So I'm going to delete this and I'm going to say File Place or Control D, select my document, and you should just click once and it gives you the scale that you need. You place it in the middle of the grid and you call it a day because we're done. This is your first project. So we're happy. As I mentioned last class, this is seen like badly, but it's only because it's a preview. So you just need to make sure that you know that actually there's a high view performance, but you don't need to actually use that. You can just keep on working under typical display because you know it's going to print properly. Okay. Okay. Now, obviously, you're going to do one time this, and then you're going to do another one. Let's imagine similar, and it's going to be here, and then another one. It's going to be here, another one's going to be here, another one's going to be here, another one's going to be here. No, so that's why the Illustrator template is so important, because when you do another project, that new project should follow exactly the same guidelines. So this object is exactly aligned to that one, this one to this one, et cetera, et cetera. No? So they're going to be perfectly matching components in terms of alignments, line weight, line thickness, et cetera, et cetera. Everything should be precisely the same for each of the projects. Control-C this. Now, in your case, for next class, I would like you to do just one, which is pretty much what you almost did if you did it for the previous class. But I want you to start including guidelines in Illustrator and other more precise elements that I talked about in this video recording. Okay. Now, if you're here, you should also be able to do a file export. And you're gonna call it, you know, RSDS 209 panel 1, and you're gonna save it. You're gonna say export. And there is your project ready to be printed with a perfectly vector-based quality, sharp as it can be, file, print, plotter, whatever it is. You don't have to print it because you're gonna present it to us digitally, okay? Last thing to say is that we are in InDesign here, and I kind of gave you this as a reference for you to follow. Right now, we have here a perspective and 2 elevations. That will be 1, 2, and 3 out of 5. So that's why if you want to, you might want to consider exporting also an axonometric. Maybe try, I don't know, this we don't know how to do yet, but maybe another element. And that's where the tricky part comes, because you don't have only 3 different drawings. You're going to have 5 drawings that you need to organize within this 10 by 10 paper space. No? How do we organize it? It's up to you. What is bigger, what is smaller, but whatever organization you do, it should be exactly the same for every single grid. Okay, so this is a great warm-up for you to use guidelines and learn how to use them as best as possible. Okay, let me stop that.